beautiful humans. Welcome to another episode of Role Models, Juicy Conversations with Beautiful Humans. I'm Jennifer Norman, founder of the Human Beauty Movement and your host. This podcast thrives on your support, so if you like what you hear, follow us, rate us, review us, and share this episode with everyone you know across your networks. So all over the news today, we see and we hear about how we are destroying the planet with carbon emissions that are causing the climate crisis. But what we don't hear as often are the stories of those courageous people who make it their life's work to heal the environment. So I want to shine a light today on one man who is doing just that. My guest today is Tim Brown. Tim is the CEO of Tradewater, a mission-driven company that works to reduce the world's carbon footprint. Welcome, Tim.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, it's such a pleasure to have you. I am honored. And so I would love for you to tell us about your background. I understand that you're a serial entrepreneur with quite a history in carbon programs, environmental policy. What caused you to develop an interest in offsetting worldwide waste?
Wow. Well, I guess my interest in working on the environment has really been lifelong. I had the benefit of being able to spend a lot of time outdoors and in wilderness areas and growing up, and always sort of felt that it was such a shame to see pollution problems and environmental degradation occurring at such a rapid pace. I grew up in the Great Lakes region, my home now in Chicago, right on Lake Michigan, but I've spent a lot of time throughout the Great Lakes and really fell in love with that region and really wanted to do something to make sure that the quality of the environment there was protected and improved. So early in my career, that's what it was about, is working on Great Lakes water quality and air quality sorts of projects. And I worked in both the private sector and in the nonprofit sector, and I helped form a nonprofit organization in 1998 called the Delta Institute, which was working on environmental quality and community and economic development issues in the Great Lakes region. And it's really through that work that I got very interested in climate and climate solutions. We did some really interesting projects on carbon sequestration from agriculture and tree planting and forest management and forest stewardship, sorts of things. And so I decided to leave the nonprofit sector in 2008 to try my hand in project development, and as a way to bring more financing to environmental solutions in the carbon space, in the climate space. So I actually started in methane work of finding abandoned methane sources that were coming from abandoned coal mines and working with folks to get those releases prevented, but doing it in a way that resulted in a carbon offset credit, which then could be sold as a way of financing the project. So anyway, those were some of the beginnings, both in the consulting field. I worked a lot with government. I worked in the nonprofit sector, but ultimately have landed in this job here at Tradewater in order to really try to increase scale, increase the flow of funds to environmental protection, specifically around climate and working on reducing greenhouse gas emissions as much as we possibly can, as fast as we can.
And that is definitely needed, because it seems like over the past, I guess it's probably been, ever since industrialization has even occurred, but the awareness and the recognition that we have to do something fast or we're not going to have much of a planet left behind for future generations.
Well, that's certainly true. If you look at the most recent reports from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which is the big UN convening of the world's leading scientists, we're on a path to see accelerated warming, which will have really serious effects. I mean, all you have to do is look at the news as to what's happened this year in terms of catastrophes around the world and multiply that. If we do not address this problem and get ahead of these emissions, increase our ambition to address as many of them as we can, as fast as we can.
Absolutely. And so speaking of that, what are the biggest offenders? We hear about jet fuel, auto emissions. We even hear about methane from cows, but what are the biggest things? I know that the work that you're doing with various projects is absolutely helpful, because I wasn't aware that there were these, oil holes that were just literally seeping methane into the air because they had just been abandoned. And so that was very, very telling, and something that I think is, from what I understand, there's over 1,000 of them just in Indiana that you were helping to close up.
Well, just in the big picture, the major sources of greenhouse gases certainly include carbon dioxide. So that comes in the form of burning of fossil fuels. That's the majority of greenhouse gases. But there are others too, like methane from a range of sources such as coal mines and oil and gas wells. There's also nitrous oxide, which is used in farming applications. There are what are known as F gases, which are the fluorinated compounds, which are things like refrigerants. So these are some of the major sources of greenhouse gases. What we do at Tradewater is we focus on the non-CO2 gases. So we don't work on carbon dioxide simply because there's really a lot of good organizations and government programs, et cetera, and policy making that is really geared towards addressing CO2 gases at scale. But there's less attention being paid to some of the non-CO2 gases like methane and refrigerants, as an example, that are extremely potent greenhouse gases and actually accelerate climate change in the near term. So, for example, some of the refrigerants that we collect are 10,900 times as potent as carbon dioxide. So therefore, getting those gases out really does make a difference. And they're broadly distributed around the world. For that particular gas, we're talking about cylinders that may have 30 pounds of gas in it, or even 12-ounce cans. And you think like, well, that's just, that's such a small form. But if we collect as many of those as we can, given the high global warming potential of those gases, it ends up adding up to be a really big impact. To date, for example, we've collected over 1 million pounds of these refrigerants, and that equates to about 6 million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent that we have collected and destroyed. Methane work, which will focus on abandoned oil and gas wells, we're just figuring out what the total impact could be, but it will be significant as well. And these are releases that are ongoing right now. They're uncontrolled. They are abandoned sources and orphaned. There's no responsible party left anymore. So plugging up those sources of gases will really have an impact. And methane in particular is one of these non-CO2 gases that has an accelerated warming impact in the short term. So as a company, we're really focusing on those forms of gases and trying to get them to scale as soon as possible.
Amazing. And so tell us what it is like for a company to work with Tradewater, because clearly there are companies that are certainly looking to become carbon neutral or carbon negative. And so in order to do that, then typically they'll work with an organization such as yourself that can help to offset their carbon emissions. Is that how it works through the projects that you do? Walk us through that.
Exactly. Yeah, sure. We actually provide these climate benefits to companies, to individuals, to small to medium-sized enterprises, sort of a wide range of organizations that, as you have pointed out, have made commitments around climate. We call them climate-facing organizations. They want to take responsibility for their releases of gases. And so what we say to companies is first start off by calculating what your carbon footprint is. And there are many calculators. We have one on our website that can be utilized to understand what your emissions are and the categories of emissions that you may be operating in your company. And then you look for opportunities to reduce those emissions as much as you can. But we can't get all of them. It's very difficult to be 100% zero emissions. So in those instances, carbon offset credits from high quality and permanent projects end up being quite useful. And that's really the role that we play, is we assist companies in achieving their climate commitments, whether they are neutrality or net zero, which is one of the big commitments that companies make. And we help them do that by providing them with high quality carbon offset credits that bridge the gases or the releases that they cannot reduce on their own. Mm. Many of our buyers participate in California's cap and trade program, which is a regulated program for reducing carbon emissions. So we supply companies in that program. But increasingly, we work with companies that have made voluntary commitments, whether they're large or small. And then we also support individuals, look at their individual impacts and to mitigate that through carbon offset credits. So that's the role that we play. And so we go after gases. We make sure they are permanently addressed by controlling them and destroying them. And then we find individuals and companies that value the climate benefit and will help by paying for it. And that revenue that we receive, then we invest in more projects. And when we think of impact is both supply and demand. So we can go out and find all these sources of gases, but if we can't find organizations that will support by financing the climate benefits, then we can't make that impact. Mm-hmm. So it's really important to work on both fronts at the same time.
Mm-hmm. And I just want to emphasize that point that it doesn't matter how big or small an enterprise, an individual who is very committed to helping to preserve this planet, a sole proprietor such as myself, I have a company which is a certified B Corp, and I make sure that I analyze what my carbon usage is and then offset it, even more so than what I am actually using up. And, or if you are a multinational or global enterprise, it really is down to the human mindset that we are here to live on this planet. We are here to serve each other, and we're here to prosper and thrive. And we can't do that if we're destroying our planet. We can't do that if we're destroying the environment and the wildlife and all of the beautiful nature that is around us. And so I would encourage people to go over to tradewater.us, take a look at what Tradewater offers, use that calculator, find out what you're using in terms of carbon, and take a look at the programs. There are ways that you can partner, and there are ways that you can work with Tradewater to make this world a better place.
Absolutely. One of the programs that we're excited about is called the Carbon Neutral Collective, that is really geared to small to medium-sized enterprises that can utilize their carbon calculators. They can acquire the carbon offset credits from our platform, but they can also let it be known that they are carbon neutral. There's branding and other marketing tools that are available to help forecast to suppliers, to customers, clients, et cetera, that the small to medium-sized enterprises made that commitment. And that's something that we've launched just recently, and we're excited about it and would love to have as many small to medium-sized companies join us. And I think that many companies don't have access to good projects. They don't necessarily know, like, how is it that I can make a difference and have an impact? And I'm really happy that the kinds of projects that we're doing provide that opportunity. We're always creating new climate benefits. Every dollar that we get goes into creating new opportunities and projects, that we really view our buyers as partners that are enabling these gases to be collected and destroyed, which would otherwise be released into the atmosphere.
Yeah. And you're reminding me of this, wonderful quote that I love from Maya Angelou. And that is that, we do as best as we can until we know better. And once we know better, we do better. And so this seems to be the philosophy that Tradewater and that you have, in that it's constant innovation. It's constantly thinking about what more can we do? What more have we learned? And how can we offset any kind of damage that has been done with these new learnings? What can we see that can have the most impact in our work? And you're really ascribing into that in order to get new programs together. And to your point, you're always creating new concepts and new things for people to opt into.
Well, one of the things about this particular field and the climate crisis is that it requires more ambition all the time. We cannot prevent this crisis from becoming a real catastrophe unless we all come together to find pathways to mitigate the release of gases as much as possible. When we started this work, particularly around these refrigerants that we collect and destroy, I didn't know that there were so many out there. And I thought, well, we'll just do this project, collect them all, and we'll be done with it. Little did I know that these gases are so pervasively distributed all over the world. So we try to make goals. At one point we said, well, if we can get 1 million tons out, that would be exciting. Now we've changed it so that we are seeking to get 3 million tons a year of these gases destroyed.
Wow.
And I'm happy to say that to date, we've done over 6 million tons of CO2 collected and destroyed. And 2023, we will surpass the 3 million ton mark for 1 year. So now that we've reached those thresholds, we can ask ourselves, what more can we do? Is there a way to increase this impact and increase the scale of what we do? I don't know the answer to that, but certainly are up for the challenge, because that's really what it's going to take.
Yeah, all about asking the question in the first place. And that really is the most important part of it, being willing to ask those questions.
Absolutely.
So now, Tim, you know a thing or two about using the power of business as a force for good, and you decided to have Tradewater become a B Corp certified business. So can you tell listeners what exactly is a B Corp? I'm sure that a lot of them have never heard of it. Some probably have, but I would say that most people aren't really familiar with the B Corp movement. And why is certification so important to you?
Sure. So B Corp is referred to as a benefit corporation. So it is a company an organization that is looking not just at their bottom line, but the broader impacts that the company can have on their community, on the environment, on their culture, on their staff. And so it's an intentional program that really asks you to look at your operations and look at the impacts that you're having, and to show that you are taking that seriously and that you are reducing those impacts and you are making commitments around responsibility in these areas as much as possible. So we signed up to do this because we are a mission-based company, and we thought that it would be good to subject ourselves to third-party review, to sign on to the principles and the values of being a benefit corporation, and then to provide the data and the information to third-party evaluators to ensure that, in fact, we qualified, that we were operating our business with our impacts in mind in order to minimize those, and also to enhance sort of the community that we touch, whether it is our employees, our supply chains, our customers, et cetera. So it's actually been a surprisingly rigorous experience. All of our work is subject to verification by third parties on a regular basis, but the B Corp one was pretty intense. I think it took well over a year to get through the evaluation process, but we found it to be very instructive and useful because it caused us to really think hard about the range of ways that an organization has impact, and then to look at ways that we can reduce that. And also looking at sort of how we address diversity, equity, inclusion, how we look at our pay structures, how we look at our benefits to our employees, and sort of a whole range of things that that a company touches. And so I think it's been useful to me to have us go through it, and it helps us to, when we say that we're a mission-based company, we can also prove it because we went through the B Corp certification program and obtained our certification. So I think it's been really helpful. And this happened just recently. So we're very excited to also explore the B Corp community and get to know more companies and colleagues that are in that space. And we're excited about that opportunity as well.
Yeah. And I just want to also make mention that for those of you listening, it is wonderful for you to go over to the B Corp website and look at the directory, because there are, I want to say, about 5,000 or so companies worldwide. There's not many. 5,000 is actually a lot versus what it was even 3 years ago when I became B Corp certified for the human beauty movement. I think that there were about 3,000 at that point, but there's about 5,000 now worldwide. And there's not that many because it is very difficult. In order to become B Corp certified, there are rigorous standards that a company needs to achieve in order to be qualified to be a B Corp. And this is important because when a company is doing good and is measured by their impact and is held accountable to that impact, it really matters. It makes a difference because you know that that company is not greenwashing. You know they're not doing it for marketing or simply publicity. There are a lot of other companies, regrettably, that do those things for those reasons. But when a company decides to make the choice to go through the effort, a year, in some cases, I've heard that it can take companies as long as 4 years in order to even go through an assessment and to align their organizations in such a way that they would be able to obtain a license and then to continue living up to it year after year is very, very notable. And so these are companies that deserve your business. They are ones that we say vote with your dollars for, because it really is helping to serve the world when you are making a choice to support a B Corp company. And so I want to thank Tim for the wonderful work that he is doing at Tradewater. May there be many more organizations like him, and may there be many more CEOs that are like Tim that really care for the environment as well as for their employees and the good of, I would say corporate America, but I'll say the global idea of what capitalism can mean, because it can be used as a force for good.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So one parting note, Tim, if you could wave a magic wand and have every company change its behavior for the health of our planet, what would be the change that you would want to see?
I would want to see companies consider their broader impact and then do something about it. And I think that can take many forms, certainly looking at their environmental impacts, but looking at their community impacts, looking at how they are building community within their employees and their supply chains. And you mentioned earlier about companies being a force of good. That is totally true. I mean, I think that as company leaders, we have that choice. And I think I would like to see companies make that choice by first considering what their impacts are and really addressing them, because I think that that's a pathway to bringing about a lot of good.
And I would agree 100% with you, Tim. It was such a pleasure to have you on the Role Models Show today, Tim. Thank you very much for your time today, and we will be in touch.
Thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure.